Greetings everyone. In this video I'm going to be talking to you about AV and SV. These are two types of electoral system. We've already looked at first past the post, which is the one we use in the UK general elections, and we're going to look at these two, which are actually quite similar to first past the post, but with some key differences. I'm still recording in front of this rather bright window here, so I'm afraid I am still going to put the I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller so you're less distracted by my silhouetted face. So by the end of this video, you should know what these systems are, perhaps some of their strengths and their weaknesses, where they are used in the UK, and perhaps the similarities and differences that they have to first past the post. Now, before I talk about AV and SV in general, I would like to just talk about the ways that we can categorize electoral systems. Now, the textbook that we're using this year suggests that there are three types. I'd like to suggest that there are actually four, and probably different websites and different textbooks will use different kind of category types, but I'm going to use four here to hopefully show some kind of clarity and to use all the different types there possibly could be. Now, the first type is there are plurality types, which bluntly is first past the post. You should know what plurality means from our previous lesson, but it's when you get more votes than all the other candidates, or more votes than second place. Effectively, you have the most votes. This is first past the post, and it's used often to elect single candidates in a two-party system. I'll come back to and develop that point in a minute. Then we get majoritarian systems, which we're going to be looking at today, such as AV and SV, and this always provides a majority, meaning over 50% or over an absolute majority, if we want to use our terms completely accurately. And this is usually used to select single candidates by correcting a winner in a multi-party system. Then there are proportional systems, such as party list and STV, where the percentage of votes equals the percentage of seats. And lastly, there are hybrid systems, which is where you get multiple types of voting systems kind of pushed together. Now, let me make a broader point here for a minute. I said this in the introductory video. Where possible, you try and choose a voting system that fits the kind of election you are having and the kind of country that you live in, or the kind of location that you live in. So if, for example, you lived in a country where there were only two political parties or only two political parties were massively dominant, then first past the post is actually probably your suitable system, because you only have to have more votes than second place. And if there are only two parties, then first past the post is absolutely fine, because it's still telling you which is more popular out of these two parties. But if you have more than two parties, then perhaps you need to start thinking about a majoritarian system, which is where we come from with AV and SV. But that still uses the caveat that you're trying to elect single candidates. So maybe that could be a single candidate in a constituency, or it could be a single president or a head of state or something like that. But both what plurality systems and majoritarian systems have very much in common is that they are electing individuals. And normally a representative of a constituency or an area, or perhaps a president for the whole country, but you're electing a person. If, on the other hand, you want to go over to a proportional system, this is where the party that the person stands for starts to become far more dominant. So this is where you start to get a system where the percentage of the votes equals the percentages of seats. So what was the vote share of the Lib Dems? What was the vote share of the Conservatives? What was the vote share of SNP? What was the vote share of this party? And this is where a proportional system could be useful, where you have multiple parties all competing in a particular area or a particular country. And I'm hoping to kind of illustrate these points with examples as we go forward. But I'd like you to understand that there's, broadly speaking, four types, and that different systems are used for a reason. Depending on where we are and what we're trying to elect, we might use different systems. Now, I just want to be very clear here. When I use these terms, plurality systems, majoritarian systems, proportional systems, that's not actually the name of the system. That's a category. The names of the systems are the bits almost only in brackets here: AV, SV, party list, AMS. So try not to say in an exam, if you use proportional representation, because that's not a system. You'd have to say something like, if you used a proportional system like party list, like the party list system, that would be a correct way of using that in an essay. So we're talking about AV and SV in this particular video. So where is this used? Now, well, we should now know, let's go back. So AV and SV, they are used to elect single candidates by creating a winner, perhaps in a multi-party system. So we would expect to see this in situations where you are electing a person. And that is what we see. Let's have a look here. We'll start here with the UK Parliament again, and we'll come around and we'll see every time we get it. The London Mayor, you're electing one person to be the Mayor of London, uses SV. Police and Crime Commissioners, where you're electing one person to be the Police and Crime Commissioner for that area, uses SV. Let's carry on round. The Welsh Assembly doesn't. The Northern Ireland Assembly doesn't. The Scottish Parliament doesn't. Local elections and House of Parliament, as we know, first past the post. Now, the other places that use AV and SV, I think, some of the parties actually use them. So I think the Labour Party, when they're electing a leader, uses, it's either SV or AV, and I'm sorry, I can't remember which one it is. But again, you're electing a leader, you're electing one person, and so they use that particular type. Okay. So what are these systems? How do they actually work? So now you should know that they are majoritarian systems designed to create a majority. You should know that they're used for the London Mayor, police and crime commissioners, and others. And now you need to understand actually how they work. Okay, so these systems are majoritarian systems, which aims to make the winner supported by the majority of voters. What you've seen with first past the post is it always gives us a winner, but that winner doesn't necessarily have to have 50% of the vote. They can actually win with, we've probably seen as low as the early 30s, but you've definitely seen people winning regularly with late 30s and early 40s. That is not a majority. That is a plurality. And you can use that argument that says, well, actually more people voted against you than for you. So what majoritarian systems try to do is they try to create a system whereby the winner always gets more than 50% of the vote overall. So they can say that they are more legitimate. Let's use those kind of key terms from video one. They can claim that they have a mandate from the people because more than half of the people that lived in that particular area supported them. So let's use proper key terms here. A majoritarian system tries to turn a plurality into a majority. Now, how do you do that? Because actually, if 30% of the people support the Greens and 30% support Labour and 30% support the Conservatives, you've only got pluralities there. How do you transform these pluralities into a majority? This is how you do it. Broadly speaking, voters put a first and second choice on the ballot paper, which is for SV, or they rank as many as they want, AV. So here's the difference. What you do when you get your ballot paper, rather than just saying, I want this one, you rank the candidates in your order of preference. You don't get more than one vote. You only get one vote, one ballot paper. But now you can say, well, my absolute favorite one is this one. And my second favorite is this one. And if you're using SV, you just get first and second choice. And if you use AV, you can actually just keep ranking and you can keep kind of going down and say, well, here's my third choice, here's my kind of fourth choice. And I'll show you in a minute how this works. But in effect, then what it does is it eliminates the lower candidates and then votes are redistributed. Now, what does redistribute mean? Well, it means that if I voted for a candidate that wasn't very popular, rather than my vote simply becoming a wasted vote and effectively kind of thrown away and not counting, they look at my vote and they go, well, Mr. Cox voted for Bill, but Bill isn't very popular. But Mr. Cox's second choice was Ben, so now let's move his vote into Ben's pile. So my vote is still counting. I'm showing that, yeah, sure, Bill was my favorite, but he's gone now. So I still can show that I prefer Ben to Bob, or whatever it might be in my preference. Let me show you how this works. There's a lovely website here called the Electoral Reform, let's get the website right, electoralreform.org.uk, which brilliantly shows how the different systems work, and it explains it. And I'll put these links into the Nearpod, and or you can kind of Google themselves. But I'll show you how it works. Let's go to AV first of all. So in AV, that's the one where you get to rank lots of different candidates. So I can give my top 4, my top 3, my top 2. There's nothing that says you have to rank all of the candidates. You basically rank as many as you want. So here we go. So this is our example election here, and so in this we can see that all the votes are counted, just the first preference votes, okay, just the first preference votes are counted, and John gets 32%, Mary gets 26%. So we've got a plurality for John, but not a majority, and ideally we'd like a majority to show that more people support him. So what we do is we go down to poor Marcus and we eliminate Marcus, and we take Marcus's votes and we say, right, who was second choice for Marcus? And we then redistribute those votes. So you can see here now that Marcus has disappeared. Hang on, sorry, there's someone at the door, so I'm just going to pause. Okay, so if I just go back between round 1 and round 2 here, you can see that most of Marcus's votes actually went to Mary, and a little bit of Paul kind of went up there as well. So you can see Marcus is gone. Marcus wasn't going to win, but the people that voted for Marcus still count. We still don't have a plurality, so now it's time to eliminate Helen and redistribute hers. And now we can see that most of Helen's votes went to John's. Now let's use some real life examples here. For example, if you in 2015, 2017, 2019, if you voted for, say, UKIP or the Brexit Party as your first choice, then your second choice was highly likely to be the Conservatives because of their views on Brexit. If you voted for the Lib Dems or the Greens, then your second choice or your third choice was probably more likely to be Labour. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to that rule, but broadly speaking, people tend to be on the kind of the left of politics or the right of politics. And so you can kind of predict what their second choices might be. So it's not actually surprising that all of the people that voted for Marcus then preferred Mary, and all of the people that preferred Helen then preferred John, because that tends to be the patterns that you actually see in real life, is that first and second choices are often very, very similar. But we still don't have a plurality. John's only here at 37%, so now we need to eliminate George as well. So George goes, wow, and Mary has just shot up. Now, George has been eliminated. Most of George's votes went to Mary, so maybe this is a Liberal Democrat Labour link or something like that, perhaps. But we still don't have a plurality, even though Mary is now in the lead. Now, if, of course, we did get a plurality at this point, we would stop redistributing votes. So let's say, and let's just for argument's sake, let's say John had 51% of the vote right at the start. We're going to stop. That's it. It's done. And if at any point you get 50%, we stop. But we're not here yet. So now we need to eliminate Paul as well. So Paul goes, we can see the votes redistributed, and Mary has been elected the leader of this constituency, or president of the United States of Cox, or whatever it might be. Now, why this is supposed to be good is it means that all of the people who voted for Paul, George, Helen, and Marcus, their votes are not wasted. If Paul had got more votes, brilliant, Paul could have been the winner, but it meant that the people that voted for Paul, their votes are still counted. But let's just have a moment of sympathy here for the people that voted for John, because let's go back to round 1. In round 1, John was winning. John had the plurality. But by the time we get to round 5, John has lost, because when you redistribute all the other votes, we can see that Mary is more popular. Now, how do we feel about that? We can argue this one both ways. We can say, well, actually, it's good because actually Mary has more kind of combined support than John. Or we can say John was robbed. We could make an argument that says, well, John won this election, especially under first past the post. And actually, Mary's only kind of getting there on second and third and fourth choices to get into this position. You can argue it both ways. I have to say, I'm not particularly sure. But you can see that this is a feature. And Mary has the advantage that she can claim an absolute majority of support of the people in her constituency. John never could. Even once you redistribute all the votes, John only ever gets about the support of about 40% of the people in his particular constituency. So that was AV. I probably haven't mentioned this enough, but the full name for AV is alternative vote. Basically, because when you actually vote, you put who you want to elect, and then you select your alternatives. So I really like Paul, but if I can't have Paul, my alternative vote is George. If I can't have George, my alternative vote is John, and so on down. And that's why it's called the alternative vote. Very, very similarly, we then get the supplementary vote, which effectively works is exactly the same principles. It's turning the plurality into a majority, and it's almost the same, except instead of voting for maybe 4 or 5 candidates, you have to pick your top 2. So in some ways, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit simpler. So you don't need to kind of think, oh, do I care? You know, Lib Dems, Green, who's my most favorite there? You know, it's a bit more simple because all you need to do is go, well, this is my first choice, and this is my second choice. And it's going to look a bit more complicated on the graph, but from the voter, it's actually a bit more simple. So what supplementary vote does, and supplementary simply means kind of like in addition, so effectively additional vote, supplement, alternative vote, supplementary vote, you know, it's all kind of means the same. What it does is it takes, everyone votes, and then it takes the top 2, eliminates everyone else, and then redistributes those particular votes. And so you can see here, this was the London mayor elections in 2016. There we go. You can see it here. And you can see that they count all of the votes. And you can see that the Labour Party and the Conservative Party were the 2 favourite. So what they do is they eliminate all of the others, the Green Party, Respect Party, Lib Dems, UKIP, all the rest, and all of the independent ones. And then they immediately redistribute all of those back into the into kind of the 2 that are remaining. So, and you can see here on this nice little graph, you can see that from most people that voted for the Green Party, their second choice was Sadiq Khan from Labour. And you can see here that the Lib Dems is quite interesting, because if you look at the Lib Dems, you can see there's actually a fairly relatively even split going up to Labour and down to the Conservatives, whereas with UKIP, you perhaps got more of a bit of a pull going down to the right. Now, what's better and worse? Oh, and then essentially they look again, and hopefully one of the candidates has a majority at this point. Differences between AV and SV. Well, SV is clearer because you only have to do the first choice and the second choice. So perhaps it's slightly easier for the voter, but you do still get wasted votes. You see them here? So if, for example, you voted for the Green Party first and the Liberal Democrats second, neither of your votes will still count. And so you do still get quite a large amount of wasted votes. As you can see here, we've got almost 300,000 wasted votes in London. But at least you had that second chance. The alternative, looking at the AV, though, the advantage of AV is no matter, as long as you put the candidates in order, at some point your vote will count towards the final result. But there is a counter argument here as well. I mean, we live in a democracy where it's one person, one vote, and the idea is that everyone's vote is equal. And you could make an argument that says that if you voted for Marcus first, and then Helen, and then George, and then Paul, and then Mary, for argument's sake, it'd be quite an unusual combination. But is there an argument to say that that person's vote is actually counting more than once? It counts here for Marcus, and then perhaps it counts here for Helen, and then it perhaps counts here for George, and so on. And yet these people who voted for John, their votes only ever kind of count once. Now, obviously, by the time we get to the end result, everyone's vote is only counted once. It's either counted for John or it's counted for Mary. But if you did have your vote redistributed multiple times, it's possible to argue that some people are kind of getting multiple attempts at this election where others aren't. I'm not necessarily saying that's a strong argument, and depending on your understanding of kind of maths there and the way you kind of read those figures, you might disagree with that argument fundamentally, or you might kind of think that's a really, really good point. But one of the arguments that goes against these two systems is that it means that some votes will count twice, or 3 times, or 4 times, whereas others will only count once. Let's go back to the PowerPoint to finish this. So let's recap what we've understood. These are both majoritarian systems, SV, the supplementary vote, and AV, the alternative vote. They're designed to get someone above 50%, to turn a plurality into a majority. They're designed to get legitimacy for the winner. Then we have a very small difference between AV and SV. SV, you rank all the AV, you rank all the candidates, SV just 2. And then we have a slightly different elimination procedure. In AV, we get rid of the lowest candidate repeatedly until we get 50%. In SV, we immediately eliminate everyone except the top 2, and then we redistribute This is used in the UK to elect most of the mayors, and it's also used by the Labour Party to elect their leader. If you click on the link, you can examine the London mayoral elections further for your understanding. And that's it. Hope you found that useful and interesting. You now should know 3 electoral systems: first past the post, AV, and SV. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.